You're listening to 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. I'm Bill McIntyre here with Jon Gallo for another edition of this week's Long Island News, the news show that brings you news stories about Long Island and about Long Islanders. And now we would like to welcome back to the show, because she's been here before, Kate Murray, the town clerk from the town of Hempstead. And we'll also be welcoming later on Dawn Clavin, but I know they're both busy. We happened to find Kate, and we got her in one place, and we get to talk to her for a little while. How are you, Kate?
I'm doing great, Bill. Happy New Year, first off, to you and all of your colleagues at Nassau Community College and beyond. And we've started with our roller skates on. I guess that's really making me age. So I guess I should say our rollerblades. We have them
come back.
Yeah, and welcoming the new year. You know, recently Dawn Clavin, of course, our senior councilwoman Dorothy Gooseby, Councilman Anthony D'Esposito, and Dennis Dunn and myself. We were just sworn in for new terms. We all won election in November, happily so. And so we just recently had that ceremony. And now I was saying to a couple of you before we went on air that this week really felt like, okay, the ceremonies are over. Everybody is sworn in. It's back to reality, back to, regular business. And of course, that's the heart of what we do. It's and so I was saying that we had a ton of weddings this week. So it really feels like we're sort of plunging back into the new year. And I guess that's a good thing. Anything that strikes of a little bit of normalcy, I guess is a good thing. And it certainly felt like that in the town clerk's office this week, for sure.
Yeah. That's good to hear. So, of course, again, we do congratulate you on that reelection and your colleagues. We did want to start maybe before we go into the present and the future. Maybe
sure.
Just a few minutes recap, from your perspective, your office and its role last year. What were some of the top line takeaways for us to know in terms of, I guess, meeting goals and, kind of serving the folks out here in the town?
Sure. Well, just to give a very quick thumbnail perspective on our office, the town clerk's office, of course, we're the largest township in America by population. We have about 800,000 residents. And so we do a high volume of business at town hall, and the town clerk and the building departments, those two departments see about 95% of the foot traffic in town hall. So we see a lot of it. And normally we perform about 1,500 wedding ceremonies per year on the premises, and by me and by the other marriage officers. And we issue between 4,000 and 5,000 marriage licenses. And I'm really glad to say that we hit those numbers pretty darn closely, even throughout the pandemic. And for that, I'm very proud, because we were able to pivot in our business practices, put sheds out on the patio, behind town hall, so that our employees and our constituents both felt safer in the outdoor air. And yet we're still able to conduct their business, do what they needed to do when they came to town hall. And so between March of 2020 and basically October of 21, we did well in just in excess of 1,000 wedding ceremonies. And I performed 500 of those ceremonies myself, whether it was in person or by Zoom, or WhatsApp, whatever it was. And so, the numbers are kind of particularly normal in a very abnormal period of time for all of us in America and throughout the world, to just kind of reach those sort of normal numbers. I was pretty darn proud of our staff. They did a great job, really stepped up to the plate and pivoted so easily and so in such a flexible way. And for that, I'm real proud of them and very grateful that they were such good sports as they were. They have families, they have their own health concerns, and yet they did not phone it in, literally.
Right.
They came into work each and every day, and and just got the job done. And for that, I'm super grateful. And we still continue to see lots of couples from the city. As comparison, the New York City Clerk's office did not reopen until September of 2021. That's about 15, 16 months of no work where we were open every day, Monday through Friday. And so we still continue to get a lot of city couples who came out out of desperation, got their licenses with us, and are getting married by us too. So I'm just pleased, very pleased with the situation, pleased with what we were able to deliver. That's just on the marriage side. Of course, all the other services were provided in a concomitant way, the same sort of volume, same numbers of people taken care of. And so, we're at the point where I think the sort of the national psyche, I think, in a way, we have to pivot, start, sort of pivoting back to a normal. And now we live with this pandemic. We live with this virus. And I think I think the collective psyche of our country is, we'll have to do that at some point, because we just can't live in a pandemic, sort of attitude world, forever. And so, I'm glad to see the numbers here. And I think our staff is now, just very comfortable with the sort of normalized numbers of folks that are coming through the door to seek out services. So, and that's what we have to do. We all have to do that sooner, later. But the bottom line is there has to be a pivot at some point.
Yeah, well, I think that's part of the new normal is because everyone will be reacting to, I don't know how to put it in a sense, the medical numbers. The amount of people getting the thing, how many people are severely affected by it. I mean, I think that's part of the problem with trying to be the new normal is people being affected either by the vaccine or by getting the coronavirus. And we don't know. There's no common across the board, everybody gets this. That doesn't happen. It's one person saying I've got my heart flutters now. Another person saying my digestion is not good. So, and it's kind of like the word of mouth is, or is just that whatever your weak link is, that's what it's going to attack. So, in that sense, it's kind of tough to have a new normal because we really don't have a standard. There's not one thing to handle. It's kind of tough. Yeah. And I would have thought that the numbers of weddings would have really gone up only because of all the other avenues a lot of them were closed. I mean, churches didn't want to have big groups, and so everybody said no. Thank God you didn't get 4,000 people that wanted you to marry them.
Well, we would have accommodated it. I have to say, I really do have confidence that we would have. I think a lot of people. I think what they did was, and I think a lot of the catering halls, the normal places that have these wedding receptions and things, I think a lot of people just put their weddings on hold thinking that this wouldn't be as long as it is.
Yeah. That's what I've heard from folks.
All right. I remember, and so I talk about naive. I remember a couple of my colleagues in the town clerk's office. They have school-age children, and I remember it was like the Wednesday, say for example, and it was, our school district has closed for 2 days, but we'll be back on, we think we'll be back on Monday. And we all thought they'd be back on Monday. Well, that was March, and they were out for the rest of the school year. I mean, I just, think everybody was shocked at, the scope of this thing. And so I think probably having that kind of mindset, I think probably a lot of brides and grooms said, well, maybe this will be 6 months, 5 months. So let's just put it on hold. The catering hall is letting us do that. So let's just put it on hold. And I think it wasn't until probably 6, 8, 10, 12 months into it, then people started thinking, I want to be married, and this doesn't look like it's ending anytime soon. So, so I think there was sort of a shock to the system to a lot of brides and grooms who initially, like I did, thought, this will be a short duration. We'll get through it and we'll be back to normal in a month or two or whatever.
Yeah.
But, obviously.
Some of those catering businesses didn't make it.
Oh, no, terrible, terrible. With the numbers, I remember when Cuomo would impose the numbers of people in
Right.
groups and things. And yeah, I don't know how places like, say, the Crest Hollow or the Sand Castle in Franklin Square, for example. I'm just thinking of a few
Yeah.
big places.
Yep.
I don't know how they survived, but so tough times for so many of our businesses, for sure. So I'm
Of
glad
course.
as the Omicron, it's crazy how transmissible it is and how many people have it. I mean, I don't know there's anyone that doesn't know someone who has it, if not themselves. But the great thing is, I was just reading today that it's 90% less fatal than the Delta variant.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just great news, obviously great progress. And I think what the traditional or the prevailing scientific information is that each variant will get milder and it'll turn into the flu or the annual kind of thing that we have. I'm certainly praying that that's exactly the course.
That's the hope, of course. And I know we had spoken with County Executive Blakeman recently, and I know he's hoping for that to be the kind of course of where this goes. We did talk to a critical care services, the pulmonologist lead at Northwell Health's North Shore University recently, and he was saying, to your point, that yes, thankfully the medical community was seeing it as a lot less actually severe in terms of outcomes and lethal, but just the transmission rate, I guess, what was so scary at first. But now knowing, again, most people thankfully are vaccinated, and knowing that there has been a lot of effort done to try to deal with also the treatments, which he spoke about a lot. That thankfully this is something that hopefully we can have under wraps a little bit easier, even though the scale of cases is a little bit off the charts. But that said, I do know there is reporting saying that there's some potential of this variant merging with the Delta variant. So that's, I know, another point of concern that, we have to just monitor, but always hope for the best. Sure. But, you want to make sure that you heal yourself and, make sure you batten down the hatches, but not too much, because we see what happens if you do sometimes. But nonetheless, like I said, there's definitely the small businesses. There's a lot at play in terms of that. I guess, we were going to talk about this with the both of you and obviously Supervisor Clavin, but, you having been at the helm as well, you could talk a little bit and then we can get him to speak about it when he joins us. The town of Hempstead, they did offer their budget, I believe $250 million, which seemed to have gotten approved. So do you want to talk about how that budget will basically, again, kind of impact the residents of the town and, how it'll be able to keep some of the services at the same level while cutting taxes, apparently?
Right, absolutely. The town board did a great job in their budgeting. Obviously, these past couple of years have been challenging with the additional costs of, protecting our staffs and rejiggering the way we provide services. But so the town board has done a really fine job, in my estimation, in keeping their eye on the taxpayer. Obviously, we know with the county executive race last year and with the DA race, crime and taxes were really, I think, the two issues that drove every conversation in and around the campaign. And the reassessment, with 65% of folks seeing increase in their taxes. I mean, we're in a very expensive area to live in. I don't have to tell any of you, that's for sure. You don't have to tell any Long Islander. Yeah. And so to be able to continue to provide the services and yet at the same time deliver a tax decrease, it's really hard to do it. I can tell you, been there, done that. And it's really, really a difficult feat because obviously everything goes up each year. And so you just have to get more clever in how you economize where you can. I would say probably our staffing levels are lower than they've been, maybe ever. Not to the point where you can't deliver the services, but they're tight. I'll tell you that. And, since every budget, 70 to 80%, depending on the budget, is personnel costs. So that's the big bill, right? And that is for every school district, every business, everything. Yep. It's always about the personnel costs. So if you could try to control those and yet still provide a worthy wage for your workers who are doing a great job. That's the trick in the budgeting. And, so they've done it. It's not easy to do. We have a great controller. He was the controller when I was there, and Don convinced him to come back because he's just really a talented person. And if there's anybody who can help you in a budgetary sense, see where their revenues might be had and where you could, switch over revenues, and not to get too boring, but it's our controller. And believe me,
the numbers matter. Oh yeah, no, the numbers matter,
especially when they have a dollar sign in front of them. When they have a dollar
and
sign,
when it has to do with tax dollars as well. But no, certainly, we know that there's always this kind of battle for efficiency, but the concern is not to have too much austerity where you lose some of the things that everyone says. Oh wow, the town's great. We don't mind paying our taxes because we get great garbage pickup. We get whatever the service may be. But that said, how? And I know we talked about this in previous interviews and years in terms of how did the federal funding play into the budget? Does that account for that, or is that hoping that obviously some more will come going forward, or how does that play?
Well, the vast majority of the CARES Act money, and the town of Hempstead was the only town in America that actually received CARES funding, and it was because of the size of our residents, the number of residents.
Bigger than Boston.
Yes, and 4 states, and. So we were able to utilize some of that CARES Act money to make improvements in Town Hall and a couple of the other buildings to do contactless, all the bathrooms, the public bathrooms, they're now contactless.
Right.
Those kinds of things that will ultimately help in the safety of our residents and who visit Town Hall and the other facilities and our staff alike. But the vast majority of our CARES Act funding went to the different charitable institutions, the different colleges like Nassau Community College. We were able to provide a $2 million grant to Nassau Community College to help it fund its unexpected costs, the PPE, the different things that Nassau Community College, that Malloy, that Hofstra, Adelphi, that they all had to undertake because of the pandemic. We were able to help the major food banks, the Harry Chapin and the Island Harvest. We were able to, you had talked about, I think before we went on air, the Vaxmobile. We partnered with South Nassau. It was the first mobile vaccination mobile in New York State. We fully funded that, and that has been an unbelievable project. Now we're going to people who are shut-ins. We do that on a daily basis.
The homebound.
Yes, the homebound. Anybody who has an issue can't get to a vaccination site, we will literally go to their home.
That's
and
great.
we have an EMS group of employees, and they do that. It was funny. I found myself behind one of our EMS mobiles yesterday on Hempstead Turnpike, returning back to Town Hall, and she had just gone to a couple folks who could not physically get out of their homes to get a vaccine or at this point a booster, and so we're now down to that. So we're getting granular with regard to our vaccinations and who needs them, who needs a booster. And so, and finally, I have to say personally, my mother, she had her 2 vaccinations. She's 92. She'd die if she knew I was talking about her on the radio. But for some reason, she just got like, I don't want my booster. But we were approaching Christmas. And finally, I asked her for the 100th time. And she said, okay, I'll go. And so I'm proud to say that the Vaxmobile got my mother, a 92-year-old, boosted.
Wow.
And I was thrilled, absolutely thrilled. They were wonderful. But, it's those kinds of services that we've helped provide during the pandemic. Don Clavin, Anthony D'Esposito, the COVID committee, I think they've just done a really stellar job in dispersing the funds where they are needed.
Yeah, so just that's definitely good to know, and I appreciate that personal kind of anecdotal endorsement of the program there from your own family's perspective and experience. But let me just clarify though. So again, the federal funds, that was mostly for last fiscal year, but they didn't play then into the 22 budget, or was there still CARES Act money or some other kind of pot from the feds that was?
There is still some CARES Act money, as I understand it. And again, I'm not as wedded to the budget now as town clerk, but there is still some CARES Act money left over. But as the controller had explained in one of the last hearings that we just had recently in the last month, there are still bills coming in from different institutions for which we have given grants, and so they have to. Of course, we don't disperse a penny without a bill attached or an invoice attached.
Yeah, always about the paper trail.
Yes. So literally, while there still looks like there's money on the books, they still can be paying for invoices that have yet to arrive on our doorstep.
Could all be spoken for already, right?
Yes, yeah. Exactly.
That reminds me of my money. Most of the money that I make is already decided where it's supposed to go. Yeah.
Sadly enough, Bill, I'm with you, especially after Christmas.
Yeah.
This is going to be a lean month, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. For me, it'd probably
pay
be
for those Christmas gifts.
A lean year. Wow.
Yeah, but like you said, and then we know that unfortunately cost of living rises. We see this inflation crisis kind of coming hopefully to a head here. But that said, wages don't seem to keep up with them, which is a whole other story. But nonetheless, I guess just to maybe stick on this topic, maybe for just one or two more questions. Obviously, Bill, I'm not sure if you had any more too, but in terms of the COVID, like the Vaxmobile. Those types of programs. I know that, we all want to see this wane, this crisis, but in the interim, is the funding, again, going to be there at the level that it was, or is it going to start to get rolled back kind of incrementally? Because we talked to the county executive, again, Blakeman, and, we know that he has a very strong opinion, obviously, on this matter. And, we're just trying to see where we go, I guess, in the immediacy, while we get there.
Right. My understanding is that the funding still remains at the levels for the Vaxmobile we're talking about. They will still remain at the levels as they always were. The vaccinations, I know we get them from the federal government. There's no cost to the patient, which is wonderful. And, South Nassau, they have their staffing costs, but those are fixed costs for them, it's those employees. And of course, the Vaxmobile is paid for. So in a sense, the fixed costs will remain. And the personnel costs, of course, the cost of the vaccines, which come from the federal government. And so my understanding is that basically we are good to go as long as we feel that the vaccine mobile is still delivering, is still reaching our communities. We are going to continue on. I wish I could have a more definite or, statement for you. But the point is, I think the very nature of it is we don't know how long we'll need vaccines. But as long as we do, I believe we are funded and we are committed to this.
Okay.
To the vaccine.
That's great to know. And also in terms of, besides the Vaxmobile, I know a lot of those initiatives in terms of helping those small businesses deal with those costs kind of encumbered throughout this process. So that's, kind of the stuff that we were just trying to see. Right. Again, if that played into the budget going forward, and good to hear that, in some capacity it does. So let's remind our listeners, they are listening to this week's Long Island News here on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College. Still here with Bill McIntyre, myself, Jon Gallo, and thankfully joined by the town of Hempstead's town clerk.
I know, Bill, I think I know this was, of course, going to be with our supervisor. I think he's just having some connection issues at this point. I just got a text from him just to give you a little update.
Okay, so. We understand the tech gremlins, certainly having done this, mostly remotely the last few years.
Yes.
But certainly we look forward to one of these days soon, hopefully when Omicron goes down a bit, maybe being in person. We did get to have a couple of interviews in the studio before we had to somewhat defer back to. Bill is in the studio, though, for radio listeners, so there is some normalcy happening here.
Yeah, I had to come back every once in a while so I didn't forget how to get here,
Well, that's a good thing, Bill, and of course, I'm sure everybody's always thrilled to see you. when you drop in. And, that's the thing. Everybody, after 2 years or so, I mean, it's amazing that we're in our third calendar year. Everyone's going to have to kind of shift back psychologically, I think, to the idea of office, office work. I have nieces and nephews. I have colleagues who have not seen the inside of an office for a couple years, and they're getting happier and happier to be at home. But, I think ultimately that's not going to, I don't know that that's going to be the model. I do think there will be a major shift back to offices. Don't know when that will happen.
I think there are some businesses who would like their people to show up, but I think there are also others that realize that the albatross of building rent could be dispensed with, and that their productivity didn't suffer at all, and are kind of saying, you know what, if you want to stay home, do it. Not to mention the personal cost of transportation for each individual. It doesn't have to, buy a train ticket or spend gas money. And the interesting thing too, I know people who are at retirement age, and some of them are foregoing. They're not in such a hurry because now they can sit in front of their computer and do their job. So the wear and tear of, I commuted to the city for like 20 years. And trust me, it will put wear and tear on you, getting that train in the morning and then getting a subway and just to get to your desk.
Cold winter days like this.
Okay, and now we can start working for a day, and then do the reverse at night. So a lot of people I know are sadly moving out of Nassau County because of the amount of money it costs to live here, and moving to places like South Carolina, and realizing that they can keep their New York job because they can bring a computer to South Carolina and sit in their own kitchen and do their work. And they can retire a year later than they intended to, get a little bit higher Social Security, get a little bit better pension. So
absolutely. The cost of living, heating costs, everything is cheaper in the South. And, I've had some neighbors, sadly enough, make forays into North Carolina neighborhoods. And one guy told me just about a couple months ago, he said, we were looking at homes in some part of North Carolina. And he said, well, I just kind of walked around the neighborhood just to get a feel for how it was and everything. And he said, people were out, whether getting into their cars or watering their lawns, whatever. He encountered a few neighbors, and every single one was a New Yorker.
Wow.
He said there was not one North Carolinian on the block.
Yeah.
And it was all New Yorkers. And, that's certainly not going to be good for our bottom line and for our state budget. The tax revenues, obviously, they go with the constituent.
It's an old story, though. I mean, that's been the trend. Make your money in New York and spend it somewhere else.
Yes, that's it. Exactly.
People a little while ago, people were saying Panama was a great place to go to because it was like America. It was like America in the 50s.
Yes.
When you made money, they let you keep it.
I know. Exactly, Bill. I get you. I hear you. Yeah. And I know that's the lament of lots and lots of New Yorkers.
Yes.
And so, Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, they're certainly getting the benefit of our great New Yorkers at a quick clip these days, for sure. Sadly enough.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that in the picture is that used to be. I mean, that's a recurring thing. People would leave New York, but then the younger generation would be able to fill in those jobs, and they would have them here, and the tax base would be maintained. But I don't think that the younger people have as much opportunity.
No.
And part of it is student loans. I mean, that's a $1 trillion drag on our economy. A lot of people can't get that start. Yeah.
And these poor kids, some of them, they're as big as mortgages, and obviously when you're just out of college, you're at your lowest earning potential. It's awfully tough to immediately take on a student loan of the size of a mortgage. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how that kid gets along. how they get ahead.
Yeah.
You know, it's very sad. I feel terrible for recent college grads these days who have to take out a loan, and that's the vast majority, of course, of kids.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously always like to plug the school as a good way to try to defer some of those costs.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue.
Credits as cheap as possible, and move on to whatever 4-year institution, and hopefully have a little less debt by the time you get out of it. But I guess again, obviously, like you said, there's plenty of things that we want to see. Obviously, always improve. There are some things that we are making headway on, but I guess one thing that I did want to bring it back to. And like I said, we'll see if we can discuss this with the town supervisor, Clavin, if he joins us, in terms of the Narcan trainings that obviously Anthony D'Esposito, who we've spoken with before, and has really been kind of the spearhead of. I know they hit the 10,000 mark of distributed to the public here. So can you tell us a little bit more about that program and why that is so important, a part of the town's kind of repertoire of things?
And as we have heard, sadly enough, America, we hit the 100,000 overdoses, deaths. I think in 2021 for the first time in our history, and it certainly speaks to the travails that kids are having with remote learning, with young adults are having, with whoever it is, and with the opioid crisis, of course, as the basis for it. So Anthony D'Esposito, who's a councilman, former NYPD detective, he's been dealing with, and he was a detective in Brooklyn, so he was dealing with overdose deaths for many years of his tenure as a detective. And so they all, I think they all carry Narcan just if they come upon a scenario. And so he decided to, with this opioid crisis just getting ever larger, he decided to provide this service, this training, which takes about a half an hour. I've sat in a couple of times with him, and he's great. To anybody and everybody who is interested and wants to learn how to administer Narcan in the God forbid situation where they find themselves in with an overdose person. And so just recently we had gotten a grant to buy those Narcan, the kits. They come with 2 doses. And anybody who comes to the Narcan training, or anybody, quite frankly, who calls up to town hall and wants a kit, we will provide that kit to that person. And as I say, they just hit the milestone. I don't know if it's good or bad. It is good, but it's sad nonetheless, of distributing their 10,000th Narcan non-prescription. And Anthony does a great job in keeping it very simple and very straightforward in his training. And people really come out with an idea that they can do this in, as I say, in the God forbid situation where they find themselves in the presence of a person who's overdosing. It has saved thousands of people's lives, and Anthony D'Esposito will continue to do that training as long as people are interested. And literally yesterday, a woman came into my office and she was looking for a Narcan, a dose, a packet. Really? So we called upstairs and we came down with a packet for her. She just came in looking for it, no questions asked. We want to make this as easy and as accessible and as private as it can be. And it's interesting to see who comes to these training sessions. You have grandmothers, you have young mothers and fathers with their 10-year-old children as a teachable moment for that 10-year-old who was approaching adolescence and approaching those additional pressures, et cetera, et cetera. So the spectrum of people who come to the training sessions is really an eye-opener. Go ahead.
I definitely think, like you said, knowing the topic we just discussed here, knowing that, it can be tough here to just economically, survive on the island. It creates a lot of stress and anxiety and pressure on families and, family units. Sometimes the kids move back into the house.
Yes.
Sometimes, again, whether it be alcohol, whether it be, opioids, there becomes this escapism. And like you said, there's these stigmas around that surround the issue as well. So knowing that, the town, like I said, regardless of anything else, sees people as, worth, having their life saved if they can be. I'm
Absolutely.
sure, it's a great thing that people can, really appreciate regardless of, who they are or if they know this to be their personal kind of circumstances. But, like you said, sometimes you'd be surprised on who this, is impacting. So
Absolutely.
that's great. Yeah, that's important.
Yeah. And so sort of pivoting, I know we did a press conference the other day, and there is a fundraiser I just wanted to tell your audience about. It'll be Saturday night, tomorrow. I'm not sure when this is airing, but it'll be Saturday night, the 15th.
The 15th.
At Mulcahy's, which is located in Wantagh. And it is for the Widows and Children's Fund for the police. And it's for families who have lost a police officer, a spouse, a father, a mother, in the line of duty, or that they've become seriously disabled as a result of an on-the-job incident. And so this is a fundraiser for those surviving families. As I say, John Murray, no relation, but the man who runs Mulcahy, he's a really incredibly charitable person. And once again, he has opened his event space for this fundraiser. Again, it's 7:00 Saturday night, January 15th. It's certainly for a good cause to help those surviving families of police officers. So that's something that we jumped in behind. Of course, two of our council members, Anthony D'Esposito, who we were just talking about, and Chris Carini. They are both former police officers, and so they certainly have a great passion for this. These are their colleagues, their friends, former colleagues and friends, and but we all are very much behind this charity. We think it's the right thing to do for folks who ultimately give the greatest sacrifice.
That's great. How does it work, Kate? Do people just show up?
Yes, absolutely. They can, and there'll be entertainment. There'll be all sorts of fun things, but it's a great night of camaraderie. It's a great night of showing support to, as I say, to relatives, to children of slain police officers who have sacrificed themselves for us, for our protection. And so it's just a great night of camaraderie and support for those police families. And you could just show up at the door. The doors open at 7:00, and it should be a fun night. Larry Blessinger and his taxi cab company has offered free rides to anybody who has maybe a little too much fun at Mulcahy's. And so there will be free taxi cabs to get people home in a safe manner. So it's sort of the whole night is sort of wrapped up in a shield of safety. So
there you go.
Fun. You could have fun, and you could be just
and get home in one
safely
piece.
as well.
Get home in one piece too.
That's very important. We know that we've spoken on a number of accounts with Commissioner Ryder, and we know he's a big fan of Mulcahy's. And I know we've talked about in terms of the marijuana legalization discussion, having the ability to test drivers and have people take a cab. Just like alcohol, but in particular, I know he was always talking about this. One of those decisions that, especially in the 21st century, when it's only a button away, Uber or Lyft or your favorite car services, there's no reason to be driving, putting your life and obviously others at danger coming home from what otherwise would be a nice night. So certainly good to hear that that service is available, and certainly remind our listeners who are interested to go check that out. I know we have only a limited amount of time here left with you still, Kate, but I guess maybe just because it does reference, and I know that's a great thing that you just mentioned, but in terms of what I said with the marijuana legalization concerns, I know the town did decide to, as of now, opt out of the marijuana sales since it's been legalized for recreational purposes at the state level. So can you just tell us a little bit more, maybe I know you weren't on the council, you didn't put a vote in, but maybe why your colleagues told you that was the decision that they thought made sense at the moment.
Yes, absolutely. I believe it was in December 7th, our last, formal town board meeting of the year. The town board voted unanimously to not allow recreational retail establishments in the town of Hempstead. I believe all three towns and the county legislature as well voted the same way, and that was in a bipartisan way. The town board in North Hempstead is still majority Democrat. I believe they voted against it as well. And I just think, I think there's just so many concerns, and there were a lot of anti-drug advocacy groups, parent groups, some professionals who are drug counselors, a real panoply of people from different walks of life came to the town board meeting to express their deep concerns about having recreational marijuana at such close range with children in our communities. And the feeling amongst the town board members, for sure, in a bipartisan way, was that drugs are easily enough accessed. And we were just talking about the Narcan training, for example. We don't need to give in to this last aspect. And the people who want the retail stores, they say, well, it's a great revenue producer for the locality, for the state. But quite frankly, I'm deeply interested in the social services aspects. Do their services have to go up as a result of having more and more people imbibing and smoking marijuana, et cetera, et cetera? And so I'm not quite sure that the financial aspects of having retail stores ultimately helps the bottom line for governments. And that's just strictly on a financial basis, on a societal basis, the idea of our children, our young people, our vulnerable people, anybody who's vulnerable to addiction, to having it on, every street corner, so to speak. I just don't think that helps the situation at all.
I have to say, one of the things I always take issue with is that people seem to believe that because this is now legal, that more people will avail themselves of that. And I don't think there's any evidence to say that that's the truth. So the people that are smoking marijuana are already smoking marijuana. This law is not going to bring hordes of people out of the woodwork to join that group of people. This is something that already exists, and someone else is getting that money.
Well, that is true, Bill, and I know that means that there's no tax revenue. But I think my colleagues on the town board and as evidenced by all the town boards and the county legislature, I think there's just a deep feeling that the accessibility will rise for our children to get recreational marijuana.
And I think that they're not looking at the fact that that's already exists. That condition already exists. It really does.
Right, Bill,
I think there's one way. If you made it more visible, it would be more easily watched. Whereas now, this is all stuff that's under the table. It's in the dark alley. It's in the back room. It's after midnight. And if people think it doesn't exist because they can't see it, that's the misconception that I always take issue with. Because nobody is going to pick up a pipe and buy papers and go because somebody said it's okay to do. The people that are doing that are already doing it. And the town is not receiving the benefit of that financial, which I think would probably be a windfall if they knew how much money we were talking about. Look, money shouldn't drive everything. Money shouldn't drive things. But
to your point, Town Clerk Murray, just the finances of it did seem to break out that the 13% excise tax would be on marijuana sales, 9% would go to the state, and then 4% would go to the local municipalities. So that's basically, I think, what is kind of being left off the table here. And to your point too, Kate, knowing that I think 47% of the municipalities have said basically the same position, that they're not willing to open this up now. But all that said, there is the policy, and me and Bill talked about this, that the counties, they can opt out now, but they can still have the ability to opt in before the end of the year. So
Right.
maybe to Bill's point, to an extent, what have you heard? What might make maybe some of your colleagues, reconsider it potentially, if anything?
I'm not sure, to tell you the truth. I have to say, I think the town board members, at least in the town of Hempstead, I could speak to them. My conversations with them, they're fairly deeply held beliefs that the 4% tax revenue compared to the social issues that might flow from having retail establishments in our communities, it's just that it's not convincing them that 4% is worth potentially exposing younger and younger children in a very normalized way. As Bill, I think, had said, on the local street corner next to the barbershop, next to a Dunkin' Donuts, whatever,
Right.
that it normalizes it for children just on an ever younger basis. And to hear the parents and to hear the drug counselors who came to testify before the board, they were very passionate. And I think each of the town board members, especially then the two law enforcement officers who have seen it on the streets, when they were in their law enforcement careers, they were very, very strong in their opinions that this was not the way to go. I'm not sure that there's anything that really convinces that will convince this town board to go back on its decision. That's my take on them. That's
Fair enough.
About their perspectives,
Yep. Yeah. Like I said, it makes sense. If that's why they done it the first place, it would take a lot probably to change it.
I think the way that that it was put out there was that you could opt out with always the possibility of opting in, but once you opted in, you couldn't reverse that. So
exactly.
That just seems,
interesting.
yeah, that's just a bright thing to do. Because the way it is now, you can avail yourselves of either option. Once you pick that, we're in. Okay, there's no getting out. So
you're cornered in that position.
And even if and Bill, to your point, I think that legislation, even if there were some municipalities, and it's not town of Hempstead, but say there were municipalities where there was really maybe a close call amongst the elected officials.
Right.
I think that legislation would almost scare them off, because it's okay. We make this decision. Right. We're going to jump in. We're going to say yes. Now we never can get out of it.
Right.
I think that legislation, if it was, you could opt in, you could opt out, that might have convinced maybe, and I don't know, this is strictly my feeling, it might have convinced a couple of municipalities, again, I don't think town of Hempstead, but it might have convinced a couple other municipalities, maybe, hey, let's give it a go.
Right.
After a year or after 2 years, we give it a period of time, like a pilot program.
Right. You could try
and
it.
if we really don't think it's good, then we could opt out. But the legislation says, nope, once you're in, you're in.
Right. So there's no trying. There's no trying. You put your toe in the water. Nope. Now you got to go all the way in. Yeah.
Exactly. And who knows if that didn't scare off a few municipalities that, that it was just that was it. That was your forever decision and good luck.
That's a good point.
If you have any regrets,
Yeah, knowing, like you said, especially the conversation that we spoke about with the county executive in terms of home rule and, the ability of, the municipality locally versus the state. I know legislators, don't like to always cede power to, the state if they can avoid it, of course. So understandable on that front. Reminder listeners, they are listening to this week's On the News here on 90.3 WHPC, the radio voice of Nassau Community College, with Bill McIntyre, myself, Jon Gallo, and thankfully still joined here by Town of Hempstead Town Clerk Kate Murray for a little while longer. And just another topic, that I know. Yeah,
there was something I wanted to ask Kate about. We spoke to Bruce Blakeman, and he has and I understood when he said he didn't want a mandate for masks. We say, okay, nobody likes government telling everybody what to do. We get that. But I asked him if he would recommend for the people in Nassau County that they wear a mask when they get the opportunity or if it's necessary. And he kind of really didn't say yes. He basically, I'm just leaving that up to everybody. Now, when I saw this thing about the schools, one of the issues I have is I think he's by doing the mask thing the way he's doing it, I think he's kind of declared open season on school board meetings, which we saw last year. where people showed up who weren't even members of those districts to complain about kids having to wear masks. And I think that the scenario we're going to see very shortly is going to be that same thing. You're going to see people mobbing school board meetings to make sure that they're, especially schools who decide that they are going to follow the state mandate.
Right.
Yeah, it can be very contentious. I guess, maybe also in terms of the funding, because I know that was one of the big concerns that the governor, alluded to potentially pulling funding for some of the schools in the county. Have you guys had a conversation, maybe you and the supervisor, in terms of how that might impact Town of Hempstead schools? Is that a concern, or you don't think that will come to pass, hopefully?
I actually don't think it will come to pass, because I think that stick held out by the governor is very serious. Financial, school aid. And as a former assemblywoman, I knew every year, once that budget came out, everybody immediately looked at the school aid levels to see if they were higher, lower than the year prior. Right. That was a huge critical question for all the school districts. So I think the governor might trump the county executive on this scenario with the threat of withholding funds. I'd be surprised if there would be too many school boards who would risk losing state aid, school aid for their budgets. They depend on them. It's a very large part of their budgeting process. So I'd be surprised if there were very many school districts that would opt to go maskless. I think just my prediction, I have a feeling a lot of school districts will continue right through the end of the school year in June. And then September is a whole new issue. We never know where the pandemic will, and quickly being called now an endemic, where it will end, where we get to a point where masks can come off. I certainly hope it's sooner rather than later. I think there are lots of scientific studies going on these days about the effects of masks, the effects of remote schooling. All of those things, they're deeply affecting our children. And I can't imagine that there's anyone out there that doesn't pray and hope that the day when our children can go back to school, stay in school maskless, that's not, tomorrow if it could be. Yeah. Of course. But I just think I think the governor has a pretty big trump card with the financial strings. And so, I think that's where that'll be.
Okay, so we'll obviously stay tuned to monitor that because we know that's going to be important for all the parents and students out here on the island. We only got a few more minutes here. I don't want to get into the weeds with this topic because I know it can be a little bit hairy in terms of the arena, and I know you have some history in terms of your previous roles in office, but basically, the arena has been open now for a little while, and there had been a lot of traffic concerns. Oh yeah, no, a lot of people who go in it, they love it. For those Islanders games, for the concerts, it's a beautiful thing. Obviously, we heard everyone those parking concerns with the lots at the beginning. We know that they're going to work out some of the kinks, but there was, I believe, a action and a measure passed by the town council in regards to some of the parking locally. So, can you talk about that and how that's hopefully going to, address some of those concerns?
Yes, and I'm glad you raised that issue. For 39 years, because of the Belmont Stakes, just a quick little history lesson, the town clerk's office has issued parking permits to Elmont residents who live directly around the Belmont Park, right? And it was really for that one big day of the year. That was the day to protect them and their parking for all the Belmont race fans. Now, obviously, with the UBS Arena, which looks gorgeous, it's beautiful. I've heard only great things about it. With that, obviously, you have a huge influx of folks, and I think there was a double storm going on. They opened the arena, but the tiered parking is not quite done. And so that, along with fairly expensive parking, $40 or $50 to park your car, that pushed everybody or lots of folks into the neighborhood. So the poor Elmont residents, even beyond the parking that we've been doing, those neighborhoods that we've been doing for 39 years, we ended up holding a special meeting on December 21st, simply to consider expanding that parking permit district around the Belmont State Park. So we added streets that were being inundated by patrons of the Islanders, of the concerts, whatever. Whatever you were going to the UBS Arena for, they were parking in the neighborhoods. So we did that on December 21st. Since early December, my office particularly has been issuing the parking permits to all of the Elmont residents, and now we're expanding that to assist more Elmont folks who are being inundated with parking right in front of their homes. It's a terrible situation. We heard from a lot of neighbors. It's just awful. And so that's why we decided to expand the parking district. Now, the good thing on the horizon will be when the tiered parking is opened, that should, and I'm hoping, that should alleviate a lot of the parking issues in the neighborhoods. But we know that there's still going to be people who don't want to pay $40 or $50 to park, and they're going to try to find a parking spot out in the neighborhoods in Elmont. That's why we've expanded the parking. So if you do not have a parking pass, and if you don't have a visitor's pass issued by the homeowner, then you're subject to a parking ticket that could be, up until like $150. So the $40 or $50 parking is going to sort of pale in comparison to one parking ticket. So we figure that not only with the expansion of the parking, with the opening of the tiered parking, and with the realization, you get one ticket, you're going to figure out the finances. Yeah. It's cheaper to park in the park. And so we think that eventually there's going to be a great diminution of problems for our Elmont residents. We felt strongly enough to actually call a separate hearing on December 21st just to address their concerns. And so we are going to be very closely monitoring, but I literally, out of my office, I issue all the parking passes, the residential parking passes.
It also puts a little pressure on people to actually take that train.
Well, that's the thing, and that's the other thing. We only go westbound at this point, the Long Island Railroad, by next summer. Thank you, Bill, for reminding me of that. By next summer, I'm informed that they are going to start going eastbound. Once that happens, that will alleviate greatly the number of people actually looking for parking spots as well. So you have the tiered parking to come. You have both directions of the Long Island Railroad coming by next summer in a few months. So I think those two things, combined with the expanded resident parking permit program that I do through the town clerk's office, I think those three things are going to greatly alleviate this temporary kind of clog that's happening for our poor Elmont residents. Right, yeah. I think there are resolutions on the horizon and on the brief horizon.
That is good. That's music to, I know, the local residents' ears, I'm sure. So certainly good to see.
Yes, always good to talk to you, Kate. We're very informative. Look at that. We had you for a whole hour, and we still have things to talk about. We could still keep going on. So
we look forward to that another day.
You have to promise to come back. Yeah.
It was great to talk to you. I know that Don can't wait to chat with you as well about things going on in the town. We're delighted, and we certainly wish you and Nassau Community College continued great success for sure.
And the same to you.
It.
Stay
Take
well.
Care. You too.
You too. We'll talk to you soon.
Have a great weekend.
The clock on the wall says it's time for this week's Long Island News to move right on out of here. We'll remind you that you can catch this week's Long Island News every Friday at 3 p.m. right here on 90.3 WHPC.